Welcome back to Films Recapped. Today I will show you an American crime film from 2002, called Road to Perdition. Warning: spoilers ahead. Watch out and enjoy. A boy stands and stares at the ocean while narrating about Michael Sullivan. Sullivan is a contradictory fellow that the boy spent 6 weeks with on the run once. This is that story. The film then transitions to 1931 in Rock Island, Illinois, the same boy riding his bike and selling newspapers through a crowd of men going to work. Once his job is complete, he makes his way back home where he is greeted with a snowball from a little brother and a mother who lovingly watches the ensuing snowball fight. The boy's father, however, is clearly not the paternal type. When the boy, Michael Sullivan Jr., fetches his father, he sees the man pull a gun out of his waistband and put it on the bed. The following day, the family attends a wake for a colleague of Sullivan Sr. While there, Michael Jr. meets Connor Rooney, the son of Michael Sr.'s boss. He is a harsh man that is a bit unpredictable. Connor's father, John, on the other hand, is great with the two young boys. He plays craps with them and helps to keep them entertained. During the eulogy, the dead man's brother, Finn McGovern, implies that John had something to do with the death of his brother. Before he can finish his speech, Sullivan Sr. interrupts him and pulls him out of the room. He is quickly followed by Connor. They put him in a car and send him on his way. Connor says that he will talk to the man later when he's had a chance to sober up, and he is upset when Rooney tells Sullivan Sr. to go with him. He also tells the two to just talk, not to do anything else. That last bit was necessary to add, as John Rooney is a feared mob boss and Sullivan has worked his way up the ranks to be his lead enforcer. This is, of course, unknown to his two kids. Rooney raised Sullivan Sr., who was orphaned at a young age. He has grown to think of Sullivan as more of a son than his own son, Connor. This is made clear in a tender moment between the two at the wake where they perform a duet on the piano together. The evening after the wake, Connor and Sullivan Sr. meet with McGovern about what he said in his eulogy. What they don't know is that Michael Jr. has snuck along to see what his dad's job really is. He watches through a hole in the wall as the two men accuse McGovern's dead brother of stealing from Rooney, which McGovern staunchly denies. He goes on to accuse Connor of being the one responsible for the missing money. Connor responds by shooting the man in the head, and Sullivan Sr. kills the other men in the room. As they are preparing to leave the scene, Connor spots Michael Jr. and nearly shoots him too. He manages to get away from the building, but is trapped inside the estate by a closed gate. His father finds him and rather than trying to comfort or calm the boy down, Sullivan Sr. swears him to secrecy. The next morning before school, Rooney visits the Sullivans. He talks with Michael Jr. to see if he will keep quiet about what he saw the night before. He also intimidates the boy, telling him that men with honor always keep their word and make sure that their debts are paid. Michael rides off on his bike without giving any response. Sullivan Sr. and Rooney speak about what happened, and both are sure that the boy will keep his word about not telling anyone about what happened. While they are correct in thinking he won't tell anyone at school, that doesn't stop Michael from starting to act out. He gets into a fight and earns himself detention. At the next meeting with his mob associates, Rooney puts Connor on the spot and makes him own up to his actions. Connor gives an insincere apology for the murder, and his father embarrasses him in front of all the senior mob members. In one last slap of the face, Rooney invites Sullivan up to his office but does not invite Connor. Jealous, Connor gives Sullivan a letter that is supposedly from his father to give to Tony Calvino, the owner of a speakeasy that owes Rooney money. Sullivan gives Calvino the letter, who reads it and immediately reaches for his revolver. Sullivan gets to it first, though. He kills Calvino and his bodyguard. He then reads the letter and sees that it is not from Rooney, but from Connor. It tells Calvino that his debts will be forgiven if he kills Sullivan. While Sullivan Sr. is at Calvino's establishment, Connor goes to his house to kill his family. He succeeds in taking out Mrs. Sullivan and their youngest son, but isn't able to kill Michael Jr. as he was serving his detention. Michael Jr. did, however, get home just in time to hear the gunshots and watch as a shaken Connor left the house. Shortly after Connor leaves, Sullivan Sr. arrives home to find Michael sitting at the dining room table in shock over seeing his dead family. Connor tells his father what he has done, and he reacts as you might expect. Rooney is both livid at his son, but also relieved that he doesn't have to worry about the young boy talking about what he saw. Connor, not able to tell the two Sullivan boys apart, told his father that he killed Michael, when in fact he killed Peter. Rooney beats Connor and curses the day he was born, but also hugs his son and asks God for help. The two remaining Sullivans pack their bags and leave their home. Sullivan Sr. goes to the mob's headquarters not knowing what to expect. His associate, Mr. Kelly, gives him a briefcase with $25,000 and tells him to take Peter and go to Ireland where he has friends. Not aware that Connor mixed the two boys up, Sullivan tells Kelly that he can't take Peter anywhere since he was killed. Kelly doesn't reveal this vital information, but does tell Sullivan that Connor is in hiding. Sullivan points his gun to Kelly's head wanting to learn where Connor is. Kelly refuses to tell him and says that he is just relaying the message for Rooney. Not getting what he wants, Sullivan shoots the messenger, leaves the money behind, and flees. He and Michael drive through the night to make it to Chicago, where he has more associates. He needs to get to them before Rooney or Connor so he can see where they stand on the matter at hand. While he meets with Frank Nitti, mob boss of Chicago, Michael Jr. finally processes his grief and cries while in a crowded room. Meanwhile, Sullivan Sr. offers his services to Nitti in exchange for turning a blind eye to killing Connor. Nitti, however, turns him down, opting to continue his partnership with Rooney. Rooney, as it turns out, was in the next room with Connor listening to the conversation. Nitti asks what he wants to be done, and reluctantly Rooney says that Sullivan Sr. needs to be killed. However, he refuses to allow Michael Jr. to die as well. Nitti pushes him to do away with the child, saying that one day he'll grow into a man and remember what happened. Still, though, Rooney says no. Nitti gets in touch with a killer he has worked with before named Harlan Maguire and puts the hit out on Sullivan, but secretly tells him to kill Michael Jr. too. In addition to being a hired killer, Harlan is also a crime scene photographer, not for the police, but to sell. Wanting to keep his son safe, Sullivan has made arrangements for Michael to move in with his Aunt Sarah. On their way to her house, the two stop at a church and the older Sullivan spends time praying, likely for the salvation of his wife and son, and forgiveness for what he knows he has to do. The two then stop at a diner and Maguire catches up with them. Michael Jr. isn't hungry and stays in their car to read while his father eats. Maguire and Sullivan have a seemingly normal and calm conversation, but Sullivan doesn't trust the man. He sneaks out through the bathroom window, slashes Maguire's tires, and hightails it out of there. Maguire shoots after their car and breaks their windshield, but misses either of the Sullivans. Sullivan Sr. drives the two off the road and into a field. There, he lectures Michael and tells him that he needs to start listening to him because he knows better when it comes to things like the mob. After all, this is literally life and death now. Michael says that he doesn't want to be stuck with his father and his father clearly doesn't want to be stuck with him since it's his fault that this is all happening. Realizing that the events of the past few days have been bothering his son more than he thought, Sullivan Sr. assures him that this isn't the case. Connor had resented him for years and something sooner or later would have caused him to snap. For now, Sullivan has a plan, but it's one that he can't do alone. In order to get the mob to give up Connor's location, they're going to hit the mob where it hurts, their money. Sullivan plans to rob the banks where the mob has their money, but he can't do it by himself. He needs a getaway driver. So he teaches his 12-year-old son to drive. After struggling with the clutch for a bit, Michael gets it down and they are ready to go. They disguise their car and install a safe in the backseat before they start their mission. Sullivan takes only the money belonging to Capone and the mob, and goes so far as to leave his name with the bank managers. He isn't trying to hide from them, he wants them to know exactly who it is that's taking them on. However, the mob starts to get wise to their ploy and withdraws their money from the remaining banks. Not letting this stop them, Sullivan pays a visit to Rooney's accountant, a man named Alexander Rance. Rance manages to stall Sullivan long enough for Maguire, who was staying in a hotel across the street, to enter with a shotgun. His many shots miss Sullivan, but he does hit and kill Rance. Sullivan manages to shoot Maguire on the side of the head and finds Rooney's ledgers while Maguire is distracted by the pain. Sullivan slips out a window and gets into the moving car, but is not quite quick enough to not get shot in the arm by Maguire. Michael Jr. drives the two of them out of town and stops at a farmhouse after his dad passes out from blood loss. The elderly couple that lives there helps them. They pull the bullet out of the wound and cauterize it to stop the bleeding. In exchange for nursing Sullivan back to health, Michael helps on the farm and does the tasks that are harder for an old man to do. It is here that the two Sullivans bond and Michael realizes that his father does love him, he just doesn't show it in the way that other people's dads love them. In the ledgers that he stole from Rance, Sullivan Sr. learns that what McGovern said about Connor was true. He has been embezzling from his father and the mob for years. He used the names of dead men to deposit money for himself. Sullivan believes that Rooney will call off the hit on him if he learns the truth, and the two quickly leave the farm. However, they don't leave the farm before leaving a large portion of the stolen money to thank the couple for their kindness. With this debt paid, the Sullivans trek back to Chicago. Knowing Rooney will be in Mass on Sunday morning, Sullivan confronts him in church. He tells him what he's learned about Connor, but Rooney tells him that he already knows. He's been protecting his son for years and fully expects that someone will kill him as soon as Rooney is in his own grave. He might not be able to protect Connor once he's gone, but he can protect him now. Rooney tells Sullivan to get out and to raise Michael to be a better man than either of them know. Late one rainy night, Sullivan Sr. prepares both his gun and himself for one last mission. He tells Michael to go back to bed, and that after this it will all be over. Knowing that he probably won't ever see his son again, he leaves a note for the boy. Under the cover of rain in the night, Sullivan ambushes Rooney and his bodyguards. He kills Rooney's men and then slowly approaches Rooney himself. With a resolute face, Rooney knows that his time has come, and is glad that it is Sullivan that will do him in. With a sorrowful expression, Sullivan kills the man that raised him. Through the rain, Sullivan walks back down the street from where he came. With Rooney out of the picture, Nitti has no more reason to protect Connor. He never liked the man anyway. He gives up Connor's location, but only on the promise that the bloodshed ends with Connor. Sullivan finds the man that killed his family in the bathtub, where he shoots him in the head. Michael is waiting for his father to return to their hotel room with his bag packed and ready to go. When Sullivan Sr. walks into their room, the two embrace in the most loving way they ever have. Neither was expecting to get this moment. With all the men who held bounties on his head now dead, Sullivan is sure that it is finally safe to take Michael to his Aunt Sarah. She lives on the shore of Lake Michigan in a town called Perdition. The two arrive at what should be a happy moment, but Sullivan Sr. is shot and killed by McGuire, who has been waiting for them, while Michael Jr. plays with a dog on the beach. McGuire photographs the dying man and is surprised by Michael Jr., who appears behind him with a gun. Even to save himself, Michael isn't able to pull the trigger. In his last action, Michael Sr. shoots and kills McGuire to save his son. Michael Sr. dies in his son's arms, happy in his last moments to know that he did not raise a killer. In the end, he did as his father figure Rooney wanted. He taught his son to be a better man. Alone, Michael breaks down. He mourns the loss of his father, whom he only just began to see eye to eye with. Staring again at the water's edge, Michael narrates that he has not touched a gun since his father's death. It was Sullivan Sr.'s greatest fear that he would follow in his footsteps, and has done everything he can to avoid that fate. Michael takes their car and the dog and makes his way back to the last place he felt safe, the farm with the elderly couple. Most people think that's just where he grew up, and in a way that's true, but he had a whole life before the farm. Oftentimes throughout his life people would ask Michael Sullivan Jr. if his father was a good or bad man. Every time his answer would be the same, and that is that Michael Sullivan Sr. was his father. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.